Do you think this film was necessary to be made, or was it just a cash grab? Hey everyone, it is Megan from the Tea and Popcorn Podcast. Welcome to the pod. Welcome to the pod. I have a really special guest today. One of my best friends, if not my best friend in the entire world. Her name is Ciara. Welcome,
Hi.
Ciara, to the pod.
This is so fun. I'm so excited.
Awesome. Yes. Well, to get things kicked off, we are talking about Mean Girls today. And so, what's kind of your backstory with Mean Girls? Like, were you always a fan of the original, or like, what was going on? Spill the tea.
Okay. Mean Girls was very much it was made for my demographic. I was a preteen in 2004 and very much made for my generation. I really did like it. But it wasn't until I was in high school when everyone was quoting it all the time that I watched it a lot. I'm definitely a movie rewatcher, so I watched it more and more as I became an older teen.
Yeah, that's similar to my experience too. Like, I do feel like Mean Girls was definitely for our generation, young millennials, I guess. And it's really interesting because this idea really started from, well, the idea came from a self-help book. Were you familiar with that at all?
No, I had no idea. Tell me more.
Yeah, so that's crazy. It's actually based off of the self-help book called Queen Beans and Wannabes. And it was actually a self-help book for moms that had teenagers growing up in that time and dealing with cliques and everything. So that's the backstory of Mean Girls. Yeah, and Tina Fey read it and she took some inspiration from her high school years, and then brought it to Lorne Michaels, who's the producer of Saturday Night Live, because she was on it at that time, and was thinking, hey, this will be a great idea for a movie. And you know what's really interesting? Like, it just kind of shows like how random like ideas come up. You know, like she read the
Absolutely.
self-help book and was like, this will be a great movie. And it's like, what? What? How?
How would this be a great movie? And now it's one of the most referenced movies in pop culture.
Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned about the pop culture aspect of it because, you know, it is, yeah, a big cultural staple. Like, while I was doing my research last night, I went down a deep dive of Mean Girls history, but there's been like pop-up restaurants. There's actually a pop-up restaurant called Fetch at one point. Like,
No way.
that's so insane. Yeah, of course, like Mean Girls merch. I actually had a shirt that I got, like, I guess in 2014 or something that says "You Go Glen Coco." Like, I have not found it in years, but I have
I
that
am wearing
T-shirt.
this shirt that is my sister, who is 14. She lent it to me. It's still popular.
Yeah, it's just been such a cultural staple, and it's cross generations, which honestly makes sense that they will make it into a Broadway musical. So it went into a Broadway musical in 2018. Actually, I'm pulling up my notes, but yeah, 2018.
I remember when
And
that happened.
you do? Yeah, okay, I remember when it was announced. I guess like Macy's Thanksgiving Parade was the first time I heard about it.
Oh,
Oh, how was your first time hearing about of the Mean Girls Broadway show?
um, one of my friends from college, I was in college at the time, is a huge theater nerd and really keeps up on everything that's happening on Broadway. And so she brought it up to me. She was like, "Yeah, I was listening to the Mean Girls musical." I'm like, "There's a Mean Girls musical?"
Right. I remember that musical came out around the same time as like a lot of musical movie revivals came out.
Yes.
Um, Example of that would be Heathers. That's like the one that instantly comes up in my head. Mhm.
Another one, an early 2000s movie revival one was Bring It On. I remember
Yeah,
Bring It On came out around that
yes.
time too.
Yes. Bring it on. Yeah, I totally forgot they made a musical out of that, and they did like cheer stunts and whatnot. That's crazy.
Mhm.
Yeah, but there's so much. Actually, okay, I'm kind of gonna backtrack a little bit, but I thought this was a really fun fact that I want to share. So, remember Mariah Carey's 2009 song "Obsessed"? Like, why are you so
So
obsessed with
obsessed
me?
with me, yeah.
Yeah, that one. So that actually is a reference to Mean Girls.
What?
Yes, with Regina's line. Like, why are you so
You're like
obsessed with me?
obsessed with me
Yeah,
or something. Oh my gosh.
yes,
That means Mariah Carey is a Mean Girls stan. I love that.
right, right. I just thought I'll mention that. But yeah, going back to the musical, Tina Fey announced it in January 28th, 2013, that there's going to be a musical adaptation in the works. And it was released in 2017, or it did kind of like a soft launch, or kind of like an off Broadway thing. So the whole
Yes.
thing with like Broadway, they do like a show, pre Broadway show, and
Yeah,
then
like an
they
off Broadway and then it can get invited to Broadway.
yeah, something like that. So yeah, they have that. Actually premiered in Washington D.C. I did not know that on Halloween, no less, October 31st, 2017.
Of course, the only better day would have been October 3rd, obviously.
Right, exactly. But yeah, that actually Ashley Park, she was one of the original cast members, and she played Gretchen Wieners, and she has a cameo in the Mean Girls remake. So she plays the French teacher.
Okay. I recognized her from a lot of other things, but I didn't know she was like an original Broadway cast member. That's awesome.
So the show ran for a few years, but the final performance was March 11th, 2020, and the final cast was led by Sabrina Carpenter, who played
Don't
Katie
even get me
Herring.
started on that whole thing. I have a
Oh
lot to say.
yes, oh yeah, we're gonna dive into it, and then also of course Renee Rapp. Let's talk about that actually. Like I kind of think like, what if in a parallel universe that like, what if Sabrina Carpenter was actually the lead in this
I feel
instead?
like they should have done that. That was exactly what I was going to say. Like, if they were going to bring Renee Rapp in, they needed to bring Sabrina Carpenter in for Katie. Like, the casting for Katie, we'll get into that.
As we're gonna get into that. So I say all this to say the movie that we are reviewing today is of course Mean Girls 2024. I wanted to give that backstory because a lot of people thought it was just what Hollywood does, random reboots of things that don't need to be rebooted, but technically this is an adaptation of the musical,
Yes.
Broadway musical. And honestly, like I would so because I knew about the musical, I was like, oh, this might be interesting to see on the big screen, especially since I didn't get the chance to watch the Broadway musical or any adaptation of it. But I remember the internet was just kind of buzzing and was kind of thinking, like, why is this a thing? Why remake Mean Girls? It's so iconic. Like, oh, this is Hollywood running out of ideas. But what was your initial reaction to this?
So when I heard about it, I was definitely in the camp of like, do we really need a Mean Girls remake? Like, it was so iconic. And it wasn't until I sat down and watched it, traveling back from Europe, that I was like, wait, this is the musical.
So you're like the late adopter.
Yes. And I was so excited. And I feel like I would have known. I feel like honestly, part of that was in the music choices for the trailer. Like, if they had played some of the music from the Broadway or the recording from the movie instead of I Want to Get 'Em Back by Olivia Rodrigo. It was a great choice, like good theming for the storyline, but I feel like it would have been more clear that it was an adaptation of the musical, you know?
I I absolutely agree, and that actually brings me to another point I wanted to mention about the marketing of it. So I'm like such a big marketing nerd. I work in marketing, and I just found that really interesting about how a lot of movie musicals, especially like late 2023, early 2024, how they weren't explicit about the movies being musicals. Like I'll give an example, Color Purple, like that was based on the Broadway play, but they were advertising it as a remake of the 1985 film or 1984, whenever that movie came out.
Right.
Same thing with Wonka. They were not clear that it was a musical, except like little hints of the trailer. But and the same thing goes for this one. And
Right.
I guess there's this idea that people don't really like musicals, but I mean, if you've been anywhere on like theater TikTok or theater talk,
Right.
you know people still mess with musicals. Like, I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for there to be a revival of musicals. Hello, it is Editing Meg here. So, a bit of a disclaimer, we recorded this back in early September, so way before Wicked was released and before we heard the reception of Wicked. Now that we know that Wicked has become very successful, I still believe that there is going to be a musical movie revival. If you want me to talk about Wicked specifically, let me know in the comments. If you want a video on that, I will be more than happy to make that.
Mm.
But I don't know. I mean, honestly, like these marketing companies, they look at data, they look at all this stuff to make their decisions. So we only know what we don't know, but it's just
Right.
kind of, or we only know what we know, but I'm just kind of like, oh man, that's a choice. And I feel like with a lot of the marketing, they like really hit that. So I'm just thinking like maybe the people going to the theater that hates musicals, but you love musicals. But I'm thinking like people watching the first time and they're like, wait, why are they singing? Oh my gosh.
Right. It makes me think of like I took my dad to see the newer Hunger Games movie, and the
Hmm.
second that she opened her mouth and started singing, he was like, "Is this a musical?" I feel like a lot of people had that reaction probably.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like you should like really target, for that. But that's just me, really target like your audience well. But I mean, they tried like ultimately I think the marketing for like hiding that it was a musical, I think it was pretty good. One of the campaigns that I really liked was they actually played little snippets of the Mean Girls movie on TikTok, like the entire Mean Girls movie, but they just put in little clips, like 10-minute clips, to launch their TikTok page. And I thought that was pretty awesome, actually.
That's
But
cool.
it did feel like, but it did bring up a little bit of controversy too, because it was during the writers and actor strikes. So I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh,
But yeah, that's really so it's like okay, I like the idea in theory. In practice, I'm like, oh
yeah, you're walking a fine line there.
yeah. But I mean, overall, I think that was a really creative launch. But yeah, it's really interesting the marketing campaign of that. And then I remember the first trailer. I was like, "This is not your mom's Mean Girls," and I was just like, "I feel so old because this is my Mean Girls." I'm like, "Am I mom age right now? What?"
Oh my god. I
Even
was
though
like,
in
oh no.
reality, like, I mean, not to expose our ages, but we really are mom ages, but
Yep.
we don't like it, so we're good.
Should be clear though, we are not mom ages of like girls who should be watching girls.
True, true. We're like mom ages of like toddlers or young kids, but like not mom ages of watching Mean Girls. But like there are the ones that were teenagers in 2004. Yeah, they are mom age,
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just really funny. Kind of speaking of that a little bit, I'm kind of going off of track, but I was watching Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and Rachel McAdams, who played Regina George in the original, she's playing the mom in that, and it was so jarring for me. But I'm like, actually, she would play the mom of a 13-year-old. Like,
Yep.
it makes
Yep.
sense. She's yeah. I was, but like, I don't know. I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is time?
Seriously. Well, and I think she was like in her 20s playing Regina, wasn't she?
She was, yeah, but I was just still like, what?
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, let's just go into this Mean Girls reboot, remake. Not even that, but the 2024 Mean Girls, which is based on the musical. So let's just call it Mean Girls 2024, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go back to that casting with that it should have been Sabrina Carpenter.
It totally should have, especially because they got Renee Rapp, and I am forgetting the name of the girl who they cast to play Katie, but I feel like she doesn't sing a lot, but when she does, it's distracting, you know? Like,
I agree. It is very distracting. Her name is Anne Rice.
okay,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just feel like someone pointed out on TikTok because, like, during her revenge party solo when she's ordering the candy cane,
Mm-hmm.
like that was just going all over TikTok about like how terrible it was and all of that. And I was like, it doesn't sound bad. It just doesn't sound right, you know? And someone pointed out she's actually singing the harmony. She's not singing the melody. And I picked that up
Mm-hmm.
like throughout the movie. And I think that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Like the first time I watched the movie, it was very jarring for me because everyone else has just like amazing singing voices
Mhm.
and or at least voices that worked well with their characters. And a lot of them like the guy that played Damien, Jaquil Spivey, he actually was on Broadway. You could tell. So angry, it's just like it just felt off, especially when you have like such a great intro, and then it's just like, you know,
Yep.
I'm just like the vocals weren't really giving. I mean, she tried her best, but you could definitely hear the auto tune and the mixing, and that's what also threw me off too.
Yep, I just noticed that in my recent rewatch just to refresh my brain for this. Yeah, you can totally hear the auto tune. Also, her singing, though, I really do feel like she did a good job playing the character of Katie, like the innocence, the doe eyes.
I think so too. Like her acting performance was definitely really good, and I think that's probably why she got that role in the first place too. Um, because okay, I have to admit, I think I was so distracted by her singing initially that from upon my first watch, I was just kind of like, oh no, she can't be Katie, like no. But honestly, it does work, especially as a standalone sit that I had yesterday just watching it because I was gonna watch like the original Mean Girls and then watch them. I'm like, no, that's kind of unfair because I'm going to just inadvertently compare the two. So
Right.
like I did the first time, but this time I really took it on like a standalone project. But yeah, I think she did a good job capturing the spirit and the awkwardness. I think she did a really good job capturing Katie's awkwardness.
Absolutely. And the like trying to figure out this new world that she has entered that is American high school.
Yes, yes, you could definitely feel that too. I mean, granted, Lindsay Lohan did a really great job too of that, but I
Yes.
think like one thing that Angry did was she captured it in a different way, and I did appreciate that.
Yes.
She made the character her own. But I would say, okay, I think the stand-up performance is
I
she
was
played
gonna
Janice,
say that.
and she is so good.
So
Honestly,
good.
she's blown me away both times I've watched the movie.
Same.
Like she is so freaking talented and obviously beautiful, beautiful voice,
Yes.
but really talented actress as well.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, that's exactly what I was going to say. Ali Carvalho stole the show. Honestly, like we expected Renee Rapp to be Renee Rapp, and she, of course, was on a like completely different level. But for this movie, Ali Carvalho stole the show. I loved every moment of her screen time and her singing, and yes,
Yeah, and actually, I'll give a little bit more context about kind of how Janice's character is positioned in the musical version. So, actually, in the Broadway play, now I haven't seen it, but I've done my research, and Damien and Janice are they're the narrators instead of Katie.
yeah,
So that's why they're kind of forced to stand out, and also in the Broadway version, she is a lesbian, so that's very so they translated that to the movie. So I think that's also kind of what makes it a little bit different too, because you do hear more of Janice's side of the story instead of as an audience not really knowing from the original, not knowing where the fallout came from. But in this movie and in the Broadway show, it gives more context of that,
right.
which makes Janice from like a side character to actually one of the main characters in this.
I would agree. I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of thinking it almost feels like there's Janice's storyline, there's Katie's storyline, and there's Regina's storyline in this movie.
I agree. There's definitely what I kind of find is really unique too. Yeah, there is an A plot, a B plot, and a C plot. So I would say the A plot, of course, is Katie's. The B plot is Regina's, and the C plot is Janice's, and they all kind of work together. And
Absolutely.
I think that's a really yeah, that's really fascinating. And I do like how it does help the longer runtime too. But of course, since it's based off a Broadway play, you can't have a 3 hour movie, even
Right.
though, I mean, at least for like the target audience, like, no. I mean,
Exactly.
we had a 3 hour movie in like Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon, but this is more of a popcorn flick, so you don't really want to see a 3 hour Mean Girls movie.
I'd see a 3-hour Mean Girls movie, but you know.
I would too, but they're definitely been targeting it to a general audience that's like, look, I like give me a less than 2 hour movie and I'll be solid. Like it's even pushing it to be like an hour and 45 minutes at this
Well, and
point.
obviously, like, their target demographic again was teenagers. Gen Z
Hmm.
teenagers are not gonna sit through anything for more than 2 hours.
Right, exactly. Unless if it's trendy, which is why, like, well, I don't know. I don't want to go on a tangent, but I was about to say, which is why probably Gen Z teenagers did not really like. Well, some of them. I'm not going to wrap them all, but I did see a lot of criticisms with Oppenheimer with the whole Barbenheimer thing. They were like, Oppenheimer is so boring. It's too long, and I'm like, what'd you expect? But anyway, I digress. Yeah, some more pros. Yeah, Renee Rapp did her thing. It's definitely targeted towards like Renee Rapp too, being one of the main characters. I mean,
Like,
she's on the promotional material. This was definitely one of the you could tell that whoever her team was, they were like, you're gonna kick off your musical career with this and
yep.
expanding your acting career as far as theatrical acting. At least that's what I got from her and how they positioned her in the campaigning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I was kind of thinking too with like all of the campaigning with her, it was very much playing to those who were fans of the Broadway musical because anybody that you talk to who enjoyed the musical, Renee was Regina for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like Renee had
Yeah.
the best performance of Regina if you ask anybody who saw the musical. So it was definitely playing to a yeah, this is the musical, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that aspect too because it's a little bit of like a wink wink nudge nudge moment to the musical people, but I thought that was really smart too. And yeah, I mean, the first time I watched it, I was definitely paying attention to Renee Rapp the entire time. It really did feel like a Regina movie, but again, like upon rewatch, I'm just like, but like Jan Janice's role and then just like the performance is so good. But yeah, I actually kind of want to go back on my old Mean Girls notes if I could find them because they are so funny to me. Because the first time I watched Mean Girls, I was gonna do a review on my TikTok, but I never got around to doing that. But I did a review on Letterboxd and I just absolutely hated it. So I kind of want to go back to my old notes and compare my thoughts for the movie now to my thoughts on the movie then. But while I try to find those, what are some other pros you have?
Okay, I did not along the line of casting still. I did not expect to like Chris Briney as Aaron, but I really
Yeah.
loved him. Again, I feel like a lot of the casting was perfect for a Gen Z era of this story. I
Mhm.
loved Chris Briney will obviously always be Conrad Fisher to me, but I thought he played a really great Aaron Samuels.
He did. His performance grew on me. I kind of feel like okay, I think that was kind of my thing that I'm based off of my initial watches I kind of agree with is that he definitely well actually this goes for like all of the male characters. I'm going to be completely honest. It seemed like they took with the exception of Damien. They took kind of a back burner. Like I feel like Aaron definitely had more of a bigger role in the Mean Girls. The night the I was about to say the 1990. I'm like, no, it wasn't that old. Megan, what are you talking about? But the 2000s Mean Girls and but I don't know. I mean, he's a good casting for I guess a Gen Z one. Gen Z Mean Girl. So I'll give you that, Ciara. I'll give you that.
See, I disagree. I was thinking, I feel like we get a completely different Aaron though too. Like I feel in the original in 2004, he was just kind of like Aaron seemed kind of like an idiot and just kind of a side character, but I really thought with how he portrayed Aaron and the conversations he had with Katie and especially with Regina like during the Halloween scene and stuff, I thought we got a little more Aaron than we did in the original story.
Okay. You know what? That Halloween scene is really, really good. Actually, I do want to talk about the Halloween scene. Like the entire Halloween sequence really is so
Yes.
good, or at least that chapter of the story. Because okay, the Halloween kicks off with the freaking best, most funnest song in the movie, which is "Sexy."
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I okay. In Vodka. Yeah, that's her
Yeah.
name. She played Karen so well. She was definitely one of my favorite characters, like watching. And I just love it, like the first half of the movie. She just has like this really funny look on her face. It is so good. It's so hilarious. Yeah, I would say that's really funny. But yeah, that song and dance sequence cracks me up every single time.
Every single time.
Every time. It's so good. But yeah, going back to Aaron, Katie, and Regina, Regina's song is so good, and I love the way that it was choreographed and the lighting and everything. I thought that was just beautiful. It was so good and just showed how manipulative she is. And I did like that, and it did show more of like why Aaron would be persuaded by Regina after all of that because he did stand up to her, and then it kind of shows that oh yeah, she's kind of the snake charmer. She is like, she's very manipulative. She's a puppet master. That's actually better. She's a
Yes.
puppet master of everything. So I loved that.
Yes. I totally agree. And I feel like we get a little bit more of like the emotional side from both of them in like the
Mhm.
conversation that happens before Regina starts singing too.
Mhm. Yeah. Most definitely. I do like that. And coming from that scene, we also get context of Janice and also Regina's falling out, which I really liked too. And it helped drive everything too. I thought it was really good, and it made the movie a little bit different.
Yes.
I would say those are really all of my biggest pros as far as the movie goes, that I can still think of. Except, like, I do like the final credits scene in sequence. Actually, that's what I put on my letterbox. Like, that's the best part of the movie. Because initially I didn't like it, but that song that Renee Rapp does with Megan the Stallion, it is so freaking good. It's so catchy. But anyway, yeah, it's a very fun song. Do you have any more pros?
Kind of going back to the shooting of the Halloween scene and everything, I really liked the way that they incorporated the musical scenes and a lot of the freezing, which is really like natural in theater, and
Mm-hmm.
bringing in that theater source material and just how it was. I liked that they really separated that this is the part where we're singing and this is the part where like it's the story and this is more of a realistic part of the story. Does that make sense?
I like that too because I actually agree with that because I think that's actually better suited for modern audiences and maybe like audiences that are not really into musical theater too. Because sometimes you want to ease into that instead of like going, okay, this is serious acting. Boom, we're singing now. And I think that's kind of what was drawing to people that don't really like musicals.
Yeah.
Whereas like the music actually helps tell the story.
Right.
And I think that's really what makes a really good musical to me, I think. And that's what musicals are supposed to do too. So I really like that. I really like how everything was choreographed. I would say, well, I'm going into my cons, but kind of on that same side, I feel like the set for this needed to be bigger because there's the scenes in the hallway that felt really claustrophobic, and I don't know if that was intentional or not.
Right.
But I was just like, I do not want to go to this school because I feel so claustrophobic, and then everyone's crowded in the hallway. The only time that that scene actually worked was during the fight scene.
Right.
Like the revenge party dance sequence. I hated that. And then Janice's song too. Even though great song, but I'm just like when she's going through the hallways, I'm just like this school is hella small. Like, and I feel super claustrophobic in this
Right.
school.
I
Like, is this a high school or elementary school? Like, what is this?
I don't know. I feel like it could be because it did it does come from a theatrical source material, and like there's only so much space on a stage. And so they had to try and make that choreography that is based on the stage, like onto a movie set, especially with the I'd Rather Be Me. Like that probably goes just for like she has to take a few steps and she's in a completely different set. And that I'm sure that was really hard to translate onto a movie set. But yeah, no, it's definitely weird.
It just felt really weird from I guess like a movie viewing standpoint, because you usually get the opposite with, like, I could just like every other musical movie that I've seen, like it just expands the world of the musical or even the play. Like I'm even thinking about Doubt, and I actually performed in a production of Doubt, and like the actual show of Doubt, it's so small. It's so small. The production is tiny, but they expanded the world in the movie adaptation. I'm just thinking, like, what? So it felt really jarring coming from a Broadway musical where you could make it big, and they just seem to make it small and keep with the confines of everything. But again,
Yeah.
that's such a nitpick. But I'm just like, I felt uncomfortable.
My only thing is, it did add to the chaos of it, which tells the story well, I think.
It does. And I will give that the benefit of doubt. Like, maybe it is supposed to feel chaotic. One thing that I noticed, too, for my second viewing, and why initially probably it didn't work for me, is a lot of the scenes that were supposed to be comical in the original movie were played off to be kind of serious. Not necessarily by the dialogue, but how the camera angles were. Like, they would do, like, these close-up shots. Like, I'll give an example. When Regina finds out that the Kelteen bars are actually making her gain weight instead of lose weight, it's done in less of a comical way like the original Mean Girls did, but it's like it's a close-up shot making her look like a freaking horror movie villain. And I don't know, that could have been intentional, which I think was interesting, but I think like my first time viewing everything, I was just like, why is it not funny? And that's not the only time, but that's the only time that I could kind of think of at the top of my head.
Right. No, I agree with you. I think in the particular one that came to you, it's totally because Regina then goes into complete villain mode because we get world burn right after
Yes.
that.
Yes, and I think that's when it's done well, but there's times where it's like not really done well. I
No,
can't think of an instance, but there are times where that happens, trust me, bro.
absolutely. October 3rd, that line was just so throwaway, and that's one of the most iconic lines of the movie.
Yes. And like, well, it was kind of cute how they kind of did it. They're like October 3rd, like they sang it, but
Yes.
like still like I wish I wrote this down last night, but I was just like, let me just go off the cuff. But yeah, there's parts that I'm just like, no, it didn't land because of how they filmed it. But one thing that I realized is they tried to make new jokes in between the classic movie lines.
Yes.
Like, which I thought was really creative, and a lot of those really fun one-liners are from Damien, which is good. Even like the delivery
Yes.
and Damien's lines. It's so good, and it
It's
made it
so good.
even funnier, and
Right.
that's what I loved.
I feel like, no, okay, so I'm thinking of to your point, two moments. The first one, I mean, it added and made it very like 2024, but I was so disappointed when Regina's mom was like, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom, to blah, 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 whatever. I was
Hated
like,
that.
don't that iconic line. Why would you do
Yeah,
that? And then
right.
with Damien, I feel like she doesn't even go here, didn't land until he did the physical comedy of hiding.
I loved that. Like that was really good.
Yes,
Yeah,
but the
and
line
then
itself was not delivered very comically.
yeah, it wasn't even like after that. There was another comical line that she's just here for like a track meet or something,
Yes.
or like something like that, or like I don't remember because they're not really that memorable, unfortunately. You do notice those jokes, but they kind of go like in one ear out the other.
I feel like there's just not very good comedic timing with them either. Like you're not given time to appreciate it's funny, you know? Like it's just
Yeah.
moved on. Like bringing up the like I just wish we could all get along the way we did in middle school, that line, right? Like we were given time to be like, this is weird, that's kind of funny, but instead it's kind of made sad because Miss Norbury comes in and she's like, let's go call your grown up, sweetie. Like
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I found my notes. Let me kind of go through them. Actually, this is one thing that I was kind of like upset about. I put on my notes that I was nervous about this adaptation because of a Sarah Zed video, which I agree. So that Sarah Zed, she's a YouTuber, and she did a breakdown about the Broadway musical, and she did a review on it and said how it doesn't really work as a really good adaptation because they tried to be very politically correct with everything. And I was just like concerned about that because I'm like, that's the reason why the original Mean Girls was so good
mhm,
because there was a bit of a political, well, not political, edgy bite to it.
yes.
And that was like bold like back then because we got like a lot of like teeny bop kind of girly movies in the early 2000s, like we had Legally Blonde, we had all that stuff. But then we had one, it's like, okay, this is a movie about teenagers, teenage girls in particular, that can be as edgy as these stories with teenage boys and
Right.
really is mean. Like it was mean spirited, but also it had that comedy of early 2000s Saturday Night Live, which was one of the iconic seasons in my opinion. But I think I have a little bit of bias there because I grew up at that time.
Right.
But like because you had like of course like Amy Poehler who played the mom in the original, like the cool mom, and you had like all these other character or other actors from Saturday Night Live in it. So it's just like you got that vibe from that. So it was really unique and very interesting. So I was like really concerned, like, okay, are they going to tone it down or are they going to modernize the meanness? Now, when I watched the movie the first time, like the 2024 one, I thought they did tone down the meanness a bit. And because I was kind of curious, what would meanness be in 2024? But then while I'm rewatching it, I was like, I got what the meanness came from. The
Mhm.
meanness came from the cyberbullying and the making like Regina George like go viral for an embarrassing moment,
Yes.
you know, and it is just kind of like that type of thing. So I'm like, okay, that's a little bit. Now I think they could have gone a little bit edgier. I still believe that, but I'm starting to kind of put the pieces together because obviously you can't say the stuff that you can't that they said in the 2004 movie because people don't talk like that anymore. They don't throw around the R slur. They don't call people sluts all the time. You
Yeah.
know, like
Right.
all that stuff. But it's very like I would say like subtle meanness instead of overt meanness.
Also feel like the meanness is not necessarily coming from girls being catty with each other anymore, but it's the I feel like the anger and that edginess is coming from like kind of the screw the man mentality that comes in with Janice's song I'd rather be me. You know,
Mhm.
that's where I definitely was picking up on the edginess more, especially with
Mhm.
lines in that song like boys get to fight, we have to play nice. Those kinds of things. And her explaining in that movie like or in that song that we are acting this way because we don't get to just fight it out, you know?
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I thought that was fair. And then what's another thing too? Oh, I also mentioned about the lack of Kevin G, and I was disappointed in that. I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why I was disappointed back then, but like now I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever, you know?
I was thinking on my rewatch that like I feel like we don't he's not as sassy and funny. He's just
Yeah.
too chill for Kevin G.
Yes, it definitely felt like that. What did I say? Oh, I said the humor was really watered down, and I said they removed the racial humor, which is fine, but the jokes weren't funny. Because, yeah, in the original, there is a lot of racial humor, but even like I didn't mind it even back in the day, and I thought it was funny, but it's just kind of like, but it really was of its time, but I'm not gonna, like, cancel the original Mean Girls because of that, but,
It's
like, it
iconic.
wasn't, yeah, it was like, it was ironic, it was fun, it poked fun at itself, whatever. But yeah, there is one scene that is problematic, with like the Asian character not saying the N-word, but they're not actually like saying the words that
Right.
they said on the screen. Yeah, like that's the only, like, and then the sexualization of Asian girls. Like that's the only thing that's like, okay, problematic, like that's not gonna fly. But
Right.
like, why did it fly back then? But that's like the only thing. But it's not like, I'm not the type of person that's like, oh my goodness, these kids nowadays are so soft. It's like whatever, that didn't age well, and it's okay to admit something that didn't age well, but you can still enjoy something. But anyway, I'm gonna go off my soapbox there. But what else did I say too? I said I'm glad I saved my money because it's better suited for streaming. And actually, that is another thing in the backstory, is that it was originally made for streaming, but they decided to give it a theatrical release.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I'm like, it kind of shows, not gonna lie. And since we were talking about the production earlier, I think that might be some of the reason why they wanted to cut down costs. But they were like, you know what, this seems good, let's do a theatrical release. And I read an article, and it was kind of implying that the reason why they did a theatrical release is because originally the movie Smile, they were going to do straight to streaming release, but then they were like, hey, let's just try it out in theaters, and it was so extremely successful, and they had a really good marketing campaign for that. So they were like, okay, well, let's do the same thing for Mean Girls. So yeah, there's a little
Interesting.
tidbit. That's some more tea. But anyway, back to the popcorn, huh? Anyway, I tried to tie it into my title. Let me see. Oh, I said a lot of the songs were forgettable except Sexy. I do kind of agree with that. Sexy was the one that I remember the most, even after 4 months watching this. What do you think? Do you think the songs are memorable?
I definitely, the more I'm such an earworm person that the more I have watched the movie, the more I'm like, oh, this is catchy, and like I'm thinking of them later. But yeah, really the only song that stood out to me that I remember is I'd Rather Be Me, Janice's song.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because like it hit me on a personal level. So immediately after watching it added it to my Spotify playlist. So I listened
Mm-hmm.
to it like outside of the context of the movie.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Like when I first watched it, I Rather Be Me song, it hit me too, but I was also kind of like, how is this relevant to the rest of the story? But then after upon rewatching, I'm like, oh, okay, that actually makes sense because it definitely seemed like it's like, hey, like screw everybody else, like because it was kind of like, well, with the original film, like it made more sense, like Janice says like wanting to get back at not only Regina but also call out Katie. And then it just kind of felt random with a song that's like, I'd rather be myself. I don't care what anyone says. I'm like, but this is supposed to be the middle finger to Regina and Katie song. Why are you talking about middle finger to everybody? But, but then I guess it does relate to Janice's story because people made fun of her. Well, not really made fun of her, but made fun of her for reacting to Regina in the way that she did. And that's what she was getting bullied about. Not the fact that she was a lesbian, but the fact that, how she responded to Regina being mean to her. And then she's like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to be myself. Whatever. They don't want to be friends with fake people. And I'm
Yes.
like, okay, I get it. I get it for sure.
Right. And that's the opening line is it's like, so your best friend screwed you over, acted nice when she not nice. Well, here's my advice. Like,
Yeah.
here's the middle finger to them. Like, just be you. And if
Mhm.
people, and that's definitely a huge life lesson that I've learned. And that's why I've hit it. It like hit me so hard is that like friends are going to come and go, like people in your life. And like, it's okay. Just be
Mhm.
yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a good life lesson for anyone, no matter what age you are too. And that's one of the big life lessons you learn, or at least the one that I learned when I was in high school, middle school, like find the people that mess with you, and stuff, and be yourself too, because people are gonna come your way.
Yep.
Um, okay, another critique that I had was that there wasn't really that great visual storytelling or character transformations. Now, I was looking back and I was thinking about this because of Katie, and it seemed like her transformation was a little bit too subtle, but now, upon second viewing, I'm like, oh, I do see that transformation more. But I think I do like the original's character transformation as far as like through costuming a little bit better, because the original movie you do see Katie wearing a lot of blues, and when she starts becoming more plastic, she wears the more reds and bold colors and pinks, of course. And you do see her wearing blue, but it's when she's kind of in that in between trying to pretend to be plastic type of thing. Like, I'm thinking about the scene when they're walking down the hallway and she falls into the trash can. Like, she's wearing some blue, but she also is wearing pink. So it
Right.
tells the story more. Whereas for this movie, she's wearing blue when she's full plastic, and I was kind of like, okay, that's a choice. But then when I rewatched it again, she's wearing blue but more girly.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other plastics, so Regina, oh, not Regina, but Gretchen and Karen, they're also wearing blue. So they're doing plastic, but they're also copying Katie. I'm like, dude, that's brilliant.
Well, and I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking back, that totally happens in the original movie too, because I think of the scene where like they're trying to set up the party and Gretchen's like, why would you not have a party if your mom's going out of town? Like that whole scene. She's definitely wearing light blue. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember if Karen and Gretchen are, but like that full plastic, like this is my era now, like we wear blue. I
Mm-hmm.
do think that's really cool. What I saw the most change is not necessarily her outfits, but in her hair. Her hair becomes
Yeah.
more blonde. She does very different things with it. Like that's when she starts the braids
Mm-hmm.
and wearing it like fully down and
Mm-hmm.
curled. That's where I definitely see her transformation more.
Definitely. Yeah, so I felt that was kind of interesting, but get a little bit too subtle, but I'm
Yep.
like I'm like I had to take two viewings for me to see that, but again, it's whatever. There was a lot of wink wink nudge nudge references. I mean, that's fine. That's expected. We talked about that. But anyway, I would say upon my second viewing, it's my opinions have changed a little bit. I'm not aggressively mad at this remake like I was before. I don't remember what score I got. I gave it. I probably gave it like stars on Letterboxd or something. But I mean, it's all right. It's all right for a standalone film, but it's kind of hard to be a standalone film because it is so heavily reliant on the nostalgia, and that's kind of
Yep.
my problem with it. Which actually brings me to my last 2 points. What would you think have made the movie a lot better? And we kind of touched upon it, but like, what is like a couple overarching things that you think would have made the movie better?
Yeah, I would definitely say that comedic timing, like we talked about, like giving time to pause and be like, oh, yeah, that was funny, and sticking the subtle changes to make the comedy softer, the
Mm-hmm.
the harsh comedy softer. And then definitely, I would have loved to see Sabrina Carpenter as Katie.
Yeah, and in the multiverse, she would play Katie. I think about that a lot too. I kind of question, like, if Sabrina Carpenter was Katie, would she even have such, like, a massive music career as she is having right now, or musical moment?
Right.
That's
Right.
what makes you think about that so much, because I'm like, I mean, short and sweet era. It's a whole thing, and like would we have such a big success of Espresso? Would Taste be such a big hit? Would Please 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 be a big hit? Like all that bangers after bangers, if she
Right.
did this Mean Girls movie. Like, I think about that all the time. And I'm like, would I rather have Sabrina Carpenter, or would I rather, play Katie, or would I rather have Short and Sweet? I think I kind of rather have Short and Sweet. you
No,
know?
I'm with you. I'm in such a Sabrina Carpenter era, which is why I would love to see her in this role too. Because I just want more Sabrina Carpenter. But you're so right. You're so right. Like if she had done this movie, there's no way she would have opened for like the Pacific tour leg of the Eras tour,
Mhm.
and then like she would not have the musical career that she has right now.
Like, I think she'd be more labeled as an actress more than a pop singer, a pop star that she is right now if she released Mean Girls or she was
Right.
in Mean Girls. So I think it's all, but I know in an alternative universe she would have killed that role too. I'm kind of glad that we are living in the universe that we are right now. But anyway, enough about Sabrina Carpenter. I think would have made the film better is yeah, the stuff that I mentioned before. Yeah, a little that you've mentioned before too, Ciara, is just like, yeah, I just needed to have a little bit more kind of bite to it. The landing of the jokes needed to, yeah, the jokes needed to land a little bit better. Definitely agree with that. Would say, yeah, the blocking as far as the staging of everything, the blocking of the choreography and the set design. Like, y'all need to find a better school. I'm sorry. It just seems so claustrophobic. I could not stand it. And yeah, some of the cinematography too.
Right.
Just, but I kind of understand a little bit if that was intentional. But even despite it being intentional, like if the dramatic close-ups were intentional, which obviously everything has intention, and probably that's like, oh, but we want to make this scene dramatic, even though it was comedic in the beginning to kind of show Regina's transformation. I'm like, I get that, I understand the hustle. However, do I like it? No, and it's okay for me not to like it, even though that was the point. But I think it's smart. But did it work necessarily for this? No.
It definitely changed Regina's story, like it did. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think in a good way.
Yeah. I also think what made the movie better is I feel like the first half kind of dragged. I think the pacing for the first half was pretty good. It did drag on a little bit, but then it was like, I would say from the Christmas scene, like the Jingle Bell Rock type of scene, but it's like Rock Around the Pole in this movie and the musical. From that point forward, it just seemed like it sped through like so fast, and I'm like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, we're almost like done with the movie. Like, huh? Like,
Right. Like,
this, I had to actually. I was watching when I was watching it last night. I was just like, did I miss something? Because I started like kind of dozing off because I was just tired from work and whatnot. But I was just like, wait, did I miss something? No, I didn't miss anything.
right.
Like, it was just moving so fast, and I'm just like, the pacing for this last act needed to just, like, even if it was a 2 hour movie, I really don't care. Like, it did, the pacing need to be better, and that kind of brings me to the ending too. Not to spoil anything, but like the ending didn't really wrap up that well. Even though I said the best part of the movie was the ending, the last, but only because the final credit scene. But it was just like, hey, it was basically the point, like, hey, just let people just live their lives. And that was the message of the movie. And it's just like,
Which I actually really appreciate. I love that
yeah,
shift, but I'm such the kind of person that wants everything tied up in a nice little bow, right? And so in the
yeah.
original, I love that like they show a year later and everyone's just doing their thing and being themselves and everyone got happy endings, right? I missed that in this movie. I missed it so
Yes,
much. That's what would have made it better for me. Yep.
I think so too. I would have loved to follow up, even though that does kind of seem like, well, people, I guess the idea of it is just like, well, everyone kind of knows the follow up of the original movie, but it's like you could have done something different. Like, Regina didn't necessarily have to play, what was the sport that she played?
Lacrosse.
Lacrosse. Yeah, she didn't, I was about to say rugby, but no, she didn't have to play lacrosse.
Equally as aggressive.
Yeah, exactly, right? She didn't have to play lacrosse. In Gretchen didn't necessarily. I mean, of course, he didn't get the Asian hotties, or no, that I'm thinking about the what was it, the unfriendly black hotties. But
Right.
she could have been like, I don't know, something else. Like, I mean, I guess the reason why they made this decision is because the side characters. Oh my gosh, I just thought about something. We did get a start of like a Gretchen storyline, but I felt like it went nowhere.
Yeah,
Yes, we did. We got like, Gretchen feeling like insecure and like whatnot. And I'm like, I wish we got to see an ending of that storyline. So I guess the D plot, I wish that was wrapped up at least. If you could do something about it, it would have been nice to see Karen do something like, I don't know, be viral on TikTok for this. I don't know, even though they kind of hinted to that. I don't know. I'm just writing something on top of my head, but it just felt unfinished. It was just like, okay, the movie's over, dance party. It felt very much like Shrek, but not in a good way.
I agree. Like it's fun that like, it was all just like we're all dancing together and happy now. Like I love that kind of an ending, but not when in the original source material we got a nice little bow. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do agree with that. So this is my final question. With all this being said, with all of this backstory, and we talked about the marketing, and we talked about what we think of the film, do you think this film was necessary to be made, or was it just a cash grab?
Necessary? No. Am I happy it was made? Actually, yeah. I appreciate that as someone who, my sister is late Gen Z. And so I appreciate that she has a story that is similar to something that was so iconic to my generation at her exact age. But I think is a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that. It's like, it's nice to have. And the reason why I was excited for it, because I knew that there was going to be that context of seeing an adaptation of the musical, which I missed seeing on Broadway. But I really do hope that it actually brings up a revival, like a Broadway or off Broadway revival of the original, because now that actually makes me curious of what I was missing. Even though, like, at one point in the podcast, I said, based off of like someone else's opinion, that I probably wouldn't like the musical, but I'm still curious. I will pay whatever amount if they decide to do an off Broadway revival, you know,
Yeah.
because I'm really curious about how that will look on stage, and because like I said, like the movie at the ending just felt unsatisfying. The most satisfying part was that song. Like, they had really good choice of credit songs, but because if they just had like a really dumb credit song, I would have been like, no, this movie's horrible, rage quit, toss my laptop across the room, like like that type of thing. But yeah, and I think it's also like how many remakes are nowadays, really good promotion to the older film.
Right.
Like, it really is. But yeah, the cameos were cute. We got a cameo from Lindsay Lohan. Oh, I have one more fun fact from that. So Rachel McAdams actually was supposed to have a cameo, but scheduling conflicts or just things didn't work out. So Tina Fey mentioned if she could only have one person to from the original cast, the original main cast, to come back, she would have had Lindsay Lohan, and she was trying to think about which role, and she was like, okay, the role that she had was like perfect for what Katie would have wanted. And Lindsay Lohan, she got paid $500,000 for that cameo.
Dang. I mean, she
She's
does say one of my favorite lines in the whole movie that, honey, I don't know your life.
like, that was so funny. I loved that line. But yeah, that was reported by Variety. But yeah,
Mm,
so uh, I'm like, hey, get your bag, sis. Like, I love it.
right? You go, girl.
I love it. I love it. And great cameo if Rachel McAdams would have been in Mean Girls. And I think this was a good idea. And this actually comes from one of my coworkers, but it's not really his idea. But I'm like, oh, that would have been interesting. But have Regina play Regina's mom, like have Rachel McAdams play Regina's mom, would have been
Oh
great.
yeah.
Even though The Busy Phillips, Renee Rapp casting is so good because they literally look like mother-daughter.
They really
But
do. That was something I was hoping I would get a chance to mention because, oh my goodness, that was
that was perfect casting, like it really was. But my coworker, he saw this movie with his daughter, and he was like, "Wait, was that the original Regina?" I'm like, "That would have been cool."
right. That would have been cool.
Yeah.